What if the hardest season of your life wasn't a punishment? What if the chaos, the loss, the falling apart, what if none of it was happening to you? What if love, real love, the kind that refuses to leave you small, it is the most disruptive force in the universe? Today, we are going to talk about one of the hardest seasons of my life. And I'm telling you now what I know that I could not see then. Let's begin. Welcome to The Kindred Journey, the podcast for the spiritually curious, the wounded, the wandering, and the wildly awake, where nervous system healing meets spiritual transformation, and where your identity is something you receive, not something you earn. I'm your host, Lesley. You don't have to have it figured out to belong here. Now, take a deep breath. You're in the right place. Let's go. I want to take you back to a season of my life that I don't talk about very often. In the span of 5 months, this was starting in May of 2021, my husband and I, we got married. And then when he left for fire season, I had nothing to focus on because the wedding was over and I didn't have a job. I had a job, but similar to maybe a Queensland healer dog, if you know their tendencies and traits, I didn't have something that I was working towards, wanting to achieve, a goal to accomplish. So we started looking for a house to expand so we could grow into a home with a family. Doing all of the things that we presumably do, kind of unconsciously. We just assume these boxes that we're, kind of somewhat conditioned for, which, again, not saying they're wrong. It's just sometimes we can be on a trajectory that's not even ours, just because of by what we were told or what was mirrored to us. So buying this house, we ended up moving across town. And I have talked about this on other episodes that are linked in the show notes, more in depth. This is just a high level of this season of my life. So we moved mid-August, September, and then by October, we found out we were expecting our first child, which seemed everything was going according to plan. And then in the same month that we found out we were expecting our first child, my husband was diagnosed with a serious medical concern. And this is his journey. This is his story to share. So I'm pretty respectful and pretty mindful of him in that. So let me just tell you, it was traumatizing. Everything was going according to plan. We got married, we moved, we were expecting our first child, and then all of a sudden, a complete rupture in our plans, in our life. All of this happened over a course of 6 months, and there was no reprieve in between. And mostly good, yes, but we endured 4 of the 5 top biggest life disruptions, life experiences, life circumstances in a very short amount of time. And then proceeding into the new year with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of concern, a lot of what I felt was joy robbed from me with my first experience of becoming a mother, focusing on medical concerns, focusing on other things, again, that were completely out of our control. And then we proceeded to have our son in June, which was such a blessing, but it was a pretty traumatic C-section. It was a pretty traumatic labor and birth process, especially for my first. My husband couldn't be with me the first night at the hospital with our baby in the NICU, and I had to have a friend come and stay with me because he had to go home and tend to his medical needs. Pretty shattered and fractured in every way possible of what I dreamt our first year of marriage would be, what I dreamt our life was going to look like. I mean, this was the most disruptive to date part of my life that I have experienced so far. And then shortly after we had our son, we had to go live in Utah for a month for my husband's procedure. And our baby was about 2 months old, and his latch compromised while we were down there. So I was simultaneously recovering from abdominal surgery, caring for a newborn baby, living in 3 separate houses. None of them were my own. They were all out of state. My child's latch was compromised, so we had to get a lip and a tongue revision simultaneously while living in Utah for the month, and caregiving for my husband while he was recovering from this surgery. And since I didn't know any better, I told my company, yeah, I can come back to work when it's time for me to come back at the end of my maternity leave, which was while we were in Salt Lake. So all of this happening in a very short amount of time, about a year and a half's time total, really unraveled me. It really disrupted me. Everything I knew about life itself, everything of what I dreamed about life was supposed to be, and coming home after, I would say, the dust settled, but was just the biggest rupture piece of it settling was I got severe postpartum depression with my firstborn. So I didn't know it then, but every single thing about those years broke us open. And it was love doing its most necessary work. I want to be honest with something that I'm sitting with right now, because this episode is not just about the past. Love is still very much disruptive in my life. God is still doing the work of disruption in my life. And sometimes watching people you love being in the middle of disruption, especially disruption that they didn't ask for, that's its own kind of disruption. There's something uniquely hard about this kind of surrender. Because when it's happening to you, when it's happening to us, you're able to move through it. You can breathe through it. You can cope through it. You almost relatively have a sense of control because you get to move through it. But when you watch somebody that you love be in the middle of a disruption, especially one that they didn't ask for, every part of us wants to fix it, control it, soften it, take it from them. And the discomfort of watching someone you love in pain, of being with them in the disruption, without being able to remove it. That is the disruption of love in itself. Again, it requires this surrender that is different from any other kind. It's its own kind of trust, because it asks you to trust God, not just with your own story, but with theirs. And this can be for anybody, any loved one, a family member, a friend, a child. Have you ever experienced witnessing a loved one being disrupted by love, by pain? Because that is one of the hardest things love has ever asked of me. What I hold on to is this. Jesus knows exactly how much disruption and discomfort is needed for growth. I don't need to understand it. I just need to trust the one who does. I want to talk about something that took me years to understand. That disruption and love, they're not opposite. It's sometimes the most loving thing that God can do. Sometimes that crack in the foundation. It's about maybe a crack in or a fracture that got so big that it cracked. Letting the container that was too small for you finally give away. Maybe it was a season of life, a chapter, a way of living, a pattern. It's that crack, it's that disruptive love that breaks that wide open for you. And I'm not telling you that if you pray harder, things get easier. What I'm telling you is that the hardest season of your life might be the one that he carries you through the closest to his chest, in relationship with. And science of all things is beginning to back this up, because it turns out we're not just made for smooth seasons. We're built for this. We're wired for this. Even though parts of us don't want to experience it. We want to run away. We want to cope. We want to suppress. We want to numb. And again, that has its place. Don't get me wrong. But spirituality isn't just something that people believe. If you go back a couple episodes, I talked about the difference between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is your birthright, and religion is your choice. It's how you express that birthright. We are spiritual beings. It is wired into our DNA. It is a part of our genetic inheritance. And when we suppress that, when we have no language for the spiritual hunger that our soul is desiring, or when we've maybe been hurt by religion, or when our culture dismisses it, it doesn't go away. It goes under the surface, it goes deeper, and it will find other expressions. For me, it was drinking. That was my coping. That was my own numbing. That was when that pain, that disruption of love was so deep and so unbearable. That's what I turned to. It's interesting that studies have shown that the same genetic wiring that carries risk for depression, it also carries the capacity for deep spiritual awareness. And think of it this way, like depression and spiritual hunger are the same coin, just different sides. What if we reach for in our darkest seasons? What do you reach for? Is it the numbing, the performing, the escaping? Or does your soul actually try and find its way back to something sacred? Because God never separates from us, we separate from him. And sometimes it takes a disruption to crack us open enough to find our way back. This is what I call an awakening. It's truly an invitation. If you look back into Scripture, every disruption in Scripture is an invitation in disguise. The wilderness was not a punishment, it was a preparation. The exile was not abandonment, it was formation. The cross, it wasn't an end, it was the hinge point of everything. The way out of suffering is not to avoid it. It is to look it straight on and face it, to experience the discomfort. Because pain is a portal for our transformation. God's divine plan for us to create more liberation, not to stay there, not to be stuck with it or suppress it or numb it, but to move through it rather than trying to avoid it or move around it. And again, there is a time and a place for coping and survival. Like, I am not dismissing that right now. That is not the point of this episode. So please don't take this as I am dismissing people's suffering and people's pain. This is an invitation for when you are ready to move through that pain, that healing is on the other side. That liberation is on the other side of that pain. God did not create pain for us to stay in it and to stay victim to our pain. We wouldn't know joy without pain. We wouldn't know happiness. It's the full range of emotions that God has given us on this earth. We wouldn't know one without the other. Like I shared earlier, it's two sides of the same coin. You need both. We need both. We need to experience both. Or what would be a life? You couldn't gauge happiness without grief. You couldn't gauge joy or peace without sorrow and suffering. Because every little piece of pain that exists in your body, that is the opportunity for transformation. And when you recognize it, you presence it, when you feel through it on a somatic level, on a soma, body-based level, it allows you to feel liberated into something so much powerful. I would love to know one person out in this world that has experienced growth and it has been easy. It has been joy-filled. It has been perfect. It has been expansive and nothing but, no contraction. I would love to meet that person. Because growth is hard. Change is hard. We don't like what we don't know. But if we can have the courage, if we can allow ourselves to fully feel through and immerse ourselves in the expansion, in the growth, in the contraction, through the vibration, through the disruption, on the other side of that is peace, a deepening, a knowing, a relationship with God that couldn't have been built any other way. The goal here is relationship with Jesus, and healing is the result. Those years, which, I mean, it's wild how it feels like forever ago, but it also feels like yesterday. Those years of disruption of the life that I knew for 30 plus years are the reason that I am sitting here today. Those years are the reason that I am a better and more attuned and present mom. Those years are the years that created space for me to move through generations of alcoholism in my family. Those years of pain and what felt like torture and why me, God? Those years of feeling like a concrete wall was just coming in on both sides and gonna barricade me and crumble on top of me. Those years have made me into the woman that I am today. And I am so grateful for that version of myself who endured that pain, who endured that hard, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the woman that I was then. And this brings me to my next point, because I feel like this has been coming up a lot lately in conversations with other women and friends, is that there's a difference between believing in something and experiencing something. And it wasn't until those years that, yes, I had believed in God, and I probably had experienced him, but I didn't witness it. I didn't consciously realize it. But it wasn't until those years that I experienced God. I experienced his love. I experienced his steadfast presence in the heart. So typically when love is disruptive, it's precisely because that it is inviting you from believing in God to actually experiencing him. The disruption is the door. So, after sitting with that for a minute, where has love been most disruptive in your life? Again, not where life has been the hardest, but where, looking back, can you see love in the disruption? Love, not the hardest part of your life, but where was the love in that disruption? Even a thread of it, or a commonality. It could be just the beginning of a thread. And if you can't see it yet, or you can't sense it yet, or nothing is coming to you, that's okay. Sometimes you need to see beyond the trees. Sometimes you need someone to hold the light on the path until you can find it yourself. That's what we're here for. I'd love to invite you to close your eyes if you're not driving or occupied doing something else that requires your sight, but maybe pause this podcast and come back at a later time. But I invite you to close your eyes or soften your gaze, whatever feels most supportive for you. Invitation to inhale in the breath of God and exhale out any chaos, any disruption, any fear, any anxiety, whatever it is that you're carrying. Notice where you are carrying something in your body. Maybe it's a responsibility. Maybe it's a burden. Maybe it's something that you were never meant to even carry. Lord, what do you want them to know about what is happening in their body? Inviting them to recognize that it is not actually the pain they are feeling in their body, but it is something much larger than that. And if there is someone in your life right now who is in the middle of a disruption, that is hard for you to watch. Invitation to ask God, what are you doing in them? What are you making room for? What are you trying to show them? And how can I bear witness without trying to remove the very thing that you are using to form them? You don't have to have the answer. Invitation to just stay open to the question. Now, what changes between then and right now? It's not the fear. That doesn't go away. It's the knowledge that you are held. I would love to send you with a personal devotion, a felt sense of relationship with God. Not religious performance, not doctrine. Your relationship with God is the single most protective factor against the hard things, against illness, against loss, against the seasons that try to undo you. Not religion, but relationship. That is what the disruption is trying to build. Not just resilience, relationship. The kind that can only be forged in the fire. And for those of you watching someone that you love in the middle of a disruption, invitation for you to take this away today and to trust that Jesus knows exactly how much disruption this person needs to grow. Your job is not to remove it. Your job is to stay, to bear witness, and to trust the one who holds the map. And before we close, I want to give you something to carry. If this was a heavy episode for you, I see you. I've been there. If you're in the thick of it right now, this could have been dense. This could have been triggering. And that is not my intent for you. My intent is when you're in those hard seasons and you feel like you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, give that to Jesus. Give that to God. It was never meant for you to carry. I've been there and I know. I know what that feels like. And sometimes, in God's time, when you're ready to heal, God will let you know. Jesus wants to walk alongside you in the healing. You are not alone. I promise you that. If this episode stirred something in you, share it with one woman or man or whoever needs to hear it, someone in the disruption, so they know that they are not being punished, that they are being formed. Wrestling with God over time is how your true identity is formed. And if you want to go deeper, Substack is where I'm writing my book publicly in real time. The season, the one I just described, it's all being cultivated there. The link is in the show notes. I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you for meeting me here. If this episode met you somewhere real, the most generous thing that you can do is share it with one woman in your life who is wandering, curious, or quietly longing for more. She might not even know she's looking for this yet. And if you have a moment, leaving a 5-star review helps more women find their way to this space, and that is part of the healing too. I'll see you next Thursday.